caterer dropped a tray in the kitchen, and for a second, every head in the banquet hall turned. That was the only moment anyone looked away from me. From my face. From the bruise that no amount of concealer could fully hide beneath my left eye. I kept smiling. I had practiced that smile in the mirror at 5 a.m. while my husband slept 3 feet away, satisfied, like a man who had corrected the problem and was ready to move on. My name is Nora Calloway. I'm 31 years old. I'm a contracts attorney at a mid-size firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that Saturday evening, standing in the banquet hall of the Dunmore Hotel while 200 guests raced their champagne flutes for my in-laws' 40th anniversary, I was supposed to be the perfect daughter-in-law. Polished. Grateful. Quiet. I had been practicing quiet for 4 years. The bruise happened the night before. We were in the car driving back from a pre-party dinner with his parents, and I made the mistake of disagreeing with my husband in front of his father. Nothing dramatic. I said I thought the new development project his family's company was pushing into the East Ward was going to face community pushback. My father-in-law raised an eyebrow. My husband, whose name is Griffin, and who, until about 18 months ago, I believed was the most decent person I had ever met, waited until we were in the parking garage of our building before he told me what he thought of my opinion. He didn't yell. That was the thing people never understood when I tried to explain it later. He never yelled. He just got very close, very calm, and then his hand moved fast and the side of my face hit the window frame of the car door and the world went briefly white. He was sorry, of course. Immediately sorry. Handed me ice from the lobby bar in a dish towel monogrammed with our building's logo. Said I had embarrassed him. Said his father already didn't respect me because I didn't understand how business worked. Said if I could just trust him, things would be easier for both of us. I sat with the ice against my face and I nodded and I said okay. But something shifted. Something that had been bending for a long time finally went rigid. I met Griffin 4 years ago at a bar association networking event in Uptown Charlotte. He wasn't a lawyer, he worked in commercial real estate development, his family's business, Calloway Group, which had been building mid-Atlantic properties since his grandfather's time. He had that old money ease about him, the kind of man who never seems to be trying too hard because trying has never been necessary. He remembered the names of every person he met. He brought my mother flowers the first time we had dinner at my parents' house. He called me brilliant in front of his colleagues, and then later, privately, suggested I might want to dial it back a little at his family events. He just meant I could be a lot sometimes. He just meant it kindly. I mistook precision for care. By the time we got married, 2 years in, I had stopped volunteering opinions at his family dinners. I had transferred to a smaller practice group at my firm, fewer client-facing hours, because the late nights made him anxious. I had let 3 friendships go quiet without ever meaning to. His mother mentioned once, lightly, that women who made more than their husbands created resentment in a marriage. I laughed it off. My mother nodded like this was useful information. The first day he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a mark was 11 months ago. I told myself it was stress. His company was navigating a complicated acquisition. Everyone was under pressure. I was a lawyer. I understood that context mattered. The second time I told my best friend, Bex, who I had known since junior year of college. She drove to my apartment at midnight. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and said, in a very steady voice, that she needed me to hear what she was about to say. That this had a pattern, that the pattern had a direction, that she was scared for me. I told her she was overreacting. She didn't say anything. She just left her spare key on the table and told me her door was open whenever I was ready. 2 weeks later, I was ready, but not in the way I expected. I started paying attention differently, not with the part of my brain that was still trying to find an explanation that didn't terrify me, but with the part of my brain that passed the bar on the first attempt and had spent 7 years reading contracts that were designed to look like one thing while doing another. Because something else had been bothering me, something about the firm. 6 months before the anniversary party, I had been added to an internal email thread by mistake. Someone in Griffin's company had CC'd my work address instead of a colleague's. The email chain was about a tax filing amendment for a subsidiary I had never heard of, called ArcLight Meridian Holdings. I only skimmed it before forwarding it back with a note saying wrong address, but a word had snagged in my mind the way certain words do. Deferred. Undisclosed. I let it go, then I didn't. I started pulling at threads in my own time. Late at night when Griffin was traveling for site visits, I used LexisNexis the way I used it for due diligence. I found that ArcLight Meridian Holdings was registered in Delaware, which was not unusual. I found that it had been formed 14 months ago, which coincided almost exactly with when Griffin had first suggested we consolidate our finances into a joint account. He said it was simpler, more efficient. He said married people shouldn't have separate buckets. I moved my direct deposit that same week and thought nothing of it. Now I thought everything of it. I hired a forensic accountant named White, who was recommended by a colleague who did white-collar defense work. I paid him from a new account I opened at a credit union in a different part of the city. I told Griffin the charges on our statement were for a continuing legal education course I was required to complete. He didn't ask follow-up questions. He never followed up on things that didn't interest him. Dwight came back to me 3 weeks later with a 17-page report. He was very calm when he presented it, the way people in his profession are trained to be calm when the information is not. The short version was this. ArcLight Meridian was a pass-through entity connected to 2 additional LLCs, one of which was being used to receive transfers that had been routed through our joint account. Small amounts at first, then larger. The transfers had a beneficial purpose on paper. They appeared in the books as management consulting fees paid to an outside vendor. The vendor didn't exist in any verifiable way. The amounts totaled, across 14 months, just over $240,000. Some of it was from Calloway Group funds. A significant portion was from our shared finances, which meant from my income. From my salary. Being quietly redirected into a structure I had never been told about and had never consented to. He wasn't just controlling me, he was using me. I sat in Dwight's office on a Tuesday afternoon, and I looked at the report and I thought about the night in the parking garage and the ice in the dish towel, and my mother nodding at dinner and the transfer I made before I knew to be afraid, and I understood something clearly. I could leave. I intended to leave, but I was going to do it in a way that meant he couldn't follow. I had 3 weeks before the anniversary party. I used them. I documented everything. I gave copies to Dwight, to Bex, and to a family law attorney named Castellano who specialized in high-asset divorce in cases involving financial abuse. I forwarded Dwight's report and the supporting documentation to the North Carolina Secretary of State's office and to the IRS fraud hotline. I did not tell Griffin any of this. I smiled at dinner. I asked about his site visits. I picked up his dry cleaning. And I said yes when his mother called to ask if I would give a toast at the anniversary party. The Dunmore Ballroom was the kind of room that makes people feel important. Vaulted ceilings, gold sconces, round tables with ivory linens, and tall floral arrangements that cost more than most people's car payments. Griffin's parents, Hal and Lorraine Calloway, were seated at the head table on a raised dais. They had been married 40 years. There were photographs on display boards at the entrance. Young Hal and Lorraine at the beach, at charity galas, at a groundbreaking for one of the first Calloway Group projects. A family of achievement and continuity. I wore a midnight blue dress. I had covered the bruise with concealer and setting powder and a technique I had learned from a YouTube video intended for people with tattoos they needed to hide. From a distance, you couldn't tell. Up close, in the right light, you could. Griffin noticed people noticing. He put his hand on my waist when we walked in and smiled at the guests the way he always smiled, easy and assured. When a close family friend, a man who had known Hal since their Georgetown days, clapped Griffin on the shoulder and said that Nora was looking a little rough around the edges, Griffin laughed first. Said I had walked into a cabinet door. Said I needed to be more careful. The man laughed too. So did the woman standing next to him. I kept my face arranged into something neutral. My mother was at table 6 with my father and my aunt. She had seen the bruise when I hugged her at the entrance. She looked at it for a moment and then she looked at Griffin. And then she smoothed my hair back and said, quietly, "Don't make a scene tonight. This is Hal and Lorraine's evening. We can talk tomorrow." That was the moment I stopped waiting for anyone to rescue me and accepted that the only variable in this situation was me. I had asked to give the toast early in the evening, before dinner service, which was not traditional but which Lorraine had agreed to because she liked the idea of a warm welcome before the meal. At 7:15, the MC handed me the microphone. The room settled. 200 faces turned toward me, champagne in hand, comfortable and expectant. Griffin was seated at the head table 6 feet to my left. He had a slight smile on, the proprietary kind. His father sat beside him. His mother was watching me with the expression she always wore when I spoke in front of people, anticipatory, evaluating whether I was going to be an asset or a complication. I took a breath. 40 years, I said. 40 years of building something together. I think everyone in this room can agree that what Hal and Lorraine have built is impressive. Applause. Warm, easy. I've spent the last 4 years becoming part of this family, and in that time I've learned a great deal about how things work, about structures, about what looks solid from the outside. I paused, and what's actually happening underneath. Griffin's smile didn't change yet. He thought I was about to say something sentimental. I'm a contracts attorney, most of you know that. What you may not know is that I've spent the last 3 months reviewing some of the contracts that directly involve me. I reached into the small envelope clutch I was carrying and removed a folded document, a single page. This is a summary prepared by a licensed forensic accountant. It details the movement of funds through an entity called Arclight Meridian Holdings over the past 14 months. Funds that originated in part from my personal income. The room had gone the particular kind of quiet that precedes a very loud reaction. Griffin stood up. Nora. His voice was controlled. Warning level controlled. This is not the time. You told me that in the parking garage Thursday night too, I said. Right before my face hit the window frame. Someone at the table nearest me made a sharp sound. A woman's voice. Not a laugh. I turned back to the room. I have provided the full documentation to the North Carolina Secretary of State and to the IRS. I have also retained counsel and filed for divorce this morning. I looked at Griffin's father, who had gone the color of old chalk. Hal, if Calloway Group had no knowledge of Arclight Meridian, you'll want to engage your own attorneys quickly. The inquiry has already begun. Griffin moved toward me. 2 men I had quietly hired through a private security firm. They were posing as waitstaff. A suggestion from my attorney that I had initially thought was excessive and then agreed to, stepped forward from the edges of the room and blocked his path cleanly without touching him. What you're doing, Griffin said loudly now, the composure finally cracking along its edges, is insane. She's not well, he said, directing this at the room. She's been under a lot of stress. Unstable? I asked. The word landed the way I knew it would. Several people at nearby tables had their phones out. This had already gone somewhere beyond Griffin's ability to manage. I have a copy of the forensic report for anyone who would like one, I said pleasantly. I have also provided Dwight's contact information to 3 journalists who cover business and financial crime in the greater Charlotte area. I expect they'll be making some calls Monday morning. Griffin's mother stood. Nora, you were destroying this family. No, I said. I looked at her steadily. I documented what was already destroyed. There's a difference. I set the microphone down on the podium. My hands were not shaking. I had been afraid they would shake and they didn't. I walked away from the dais. The room was not silent anymore. It had erupted into that particular kind of controlled chaos, where everyone is talking but no one is moving, because no one is quite sure yet what they just witnessed or what the appropriate response is. Hal Calloway's Georgetown friend was on his phone. 2 board members who had been at the welcome cocktail hour were huddled together, and from the look on their faces, they were not talking about the floral arrangements. My mother intercepted me near table 4. Her face had gone through several expressions I had never seen it make before. Nora, she started. I know, I said. I wasn't angry at her. I had made my peace with that separately. I'll call you tomorrow. Are you safe? It was the right question. It was the question she should have asked 3 months ago, 6 months ago, the night I called her from the parking garage, and she told me couples argue and it would look better in the morning. But she was asking it now, and now would have to be enough. Yes, I said, for the first time in a while. Bex was waiting in the lobby with my overnight bag. I had packed it 4 days earlier and left it in the trunk of her car. She looked at my face when I came through the ballroom doors, at the bruise and the concealer and the expression I was probably wearing, and she didn't ask how it went. She could see how it went. We drove to her place in Dilworth. She made coffee. We sat on her porch until almost midnight with a blanket across both our laps and the sound of the neighborhood settling around us, and I told her everything, in order. The way I had not been able to tell anyone while I was still inside it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "The journalists were a nice touch." Castellano suggested it, I said. Smart woman. Yes. In the months that followed, certain things became known. The IRS inquiry into Arclight Meridian was confirmed as active. Calloway Group retained outside counsel and issued a statement indicating they had no prior knowledge of the subsidiary, which was either true or a very practiced lie. Either way, it meant the family was distancing from Griffin publicly. He resigned from his position at the company in December, citing personal reasons in a one-paragraph statement that his family's PR firm sent to the business press. The divorce was finalized 7 months after the party. The settlement included a full accounting and return of all redirected funds, plus legal fees. The bruise faded in about 10 days. I have a photograph I took of it the morning after the party, before the concealer, in the flat light of my bathroom at Bex's house. I keep it on my phone. Not because I need to be reminded. Because there was a version of me that would have deleted it, that would have believed the cabinet door story because it was easier than the alternative, that would have stayed at that party, raised her champagne, given the toast she was supposed to give, and driven home with a man who was counting on her silence. I kept my name, I kept my job, I kept Bex, who never once said I told you so, though she had every right. What I let go of was the version of myself that had been making herself smaller for 4 years, degree by degree, the way you don't notice a room cooling until it's already cold. I've been asked a few times whether I regret how I did it, the timing, the audience, the journalists, whether there was a quieter way. There was. He was counting on it. There's a photograph on my phone that I've never deleted. Flat bathroom light, no filter, no concealer. The bruise is dark purple along my cheekbone and fading yellow at the edges. I took it the morning after the party, sitting on the edge of Bex's guest bed with wet hair and cold coffee, and I remember thinking that I needed to have a record of what was real, because for a long time I had let other people tell me what was real, and I had believed them. What I understand now, looking back at every point where the road forked, is that nothing about what happened to me was random. Griffin didn't become who he was overnight. The pattern had been there from the beginning. The subtle corrections, the wardrobe comments, the way he'd go quiet for 3 days after I did something he didn't approve of. I saw those things. I named them privately, in my own mind, and then I filed them away and chose the more comfortable explanation, because the uncomfortable one required action I wasn't ready to take. That's not weakness. That's what it looks like when someone is being slowly taught that their own perception can't be trusted. But I think it matters to say plainly, the moment I stopped filing things away and started actually looking, really looking, with the part of my brain I trusted at work every day, was the moment everything began to shift. Clarity isn't a feeling. It's a decision you make to stop negotiating with evidence. I've been asked if I feel guilty about doing it publicly. About the guests, the journalists, the timing. I don't. And I've thought about that carefully, because I wanted to be honest with myself about it. The private route had a shape I could already see. Quiet settlement, a non-disclosure, Griffin moving on with a clean reputation and a new target. My silence purchased as part of the divorce terms. I had read enough contracts to know what that version cost. What I did instead was expensive in a different way. It was uncomfortable, and it was irrevocable, and it required me to stand in a room full of people who had more loyalty to my in-laws than to the truth. Hold a microphone and speak clearly. The only reason I was able to do that was because for 3 months, quietly, and without anyone's permission, I had done the work. Dwight's report, Castellano's counsel, the credit union account, the security firm. Every one of those decisions was made by someone who had stopped waiting to be saved and started solving the problem she was actually facing. Bex told me once, in the early days when I was still in the middle of it, that courage isn't the absence of fear. She said it's doing the next right thing while your hands are shaking. My hands didn't shake at the podium, but they had shaken plenty in the months before. In parking garages and lawyers' offices and quiet moments at my own kitchen table where I wasn't sure I was going to be able to see this through. That's the part that doesn't make it into the clean version of the story. The long middle, the part where you're not brave yet, you're just getting up the next morning and making one more careful decision. What I kept at the end of all of it was the thing that turned out to matter most. I kept my judgment. I kept my own name for the person I actually was, underneath everything he had been telling me I was. That's not a small thing. It's the only thing, really. Everything else, The settlement, the career, the apartment, the mornings now that feel like they belong to me, came from holding on to that one fixed point even when I couldn't see it clearly. If there's anything I'd want someone in the middle of their own version of this to hear, it's that. Not that it gets easier, because that's not always true, but that the version of you who knows the difference between what's real and what you're being told is real, that version is still in there. She's been there the whole time, reading the contracts, noticing the details, waiting for you to trust her again.